So welcome to the second webinar in the HUC Catalysis. I'm Camelia Cantor. I'm the HUC Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives. And I'll be your host and also your moderator for today. If you missed our first webinar, no worries. Our chat moderator, Brittany Grimes, will be sharing the link to the recording so you can catch it at your own convenience. I'd like to start with a few housekeeping items before we dive in. We'll be together today for about an hour. The webinar will be recorded and available on the HUC Catalysis website within a week or so. We'll also share the presentation slides for download. The session has two parts. It has an overview followed by a panel discussion, and then we will conclude with about 5 to 10 minutes of Q&As. Feel free to submit questions anytime. We did decide to only take the questions, answer those questions at the end, but just to make sure we keep the session on track. So we'll address those during the designated Q&A segment. We're really fortunate to have with us today 5 distinguished Penn State faculty who bring a wealth of experience in leading institutes, centers, and/or consortia. I'll invite them to introduce themselves briefly before we jump into today's conversation. So I'll start with Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Crowley. I'm the director of the Penn State Neuroscience Institute at University Park. So I oversee all of the neuroscience operations on our campus.
Thank you, Nikki. Matt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Ferrari. I'm the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics. I'm a professor in the biology department as well. And yes, I oversee all the infectious disease stuff happening on our campus as well.
All right, Ed.
Hi, everybody. Ed O'Brien. I'm director of the NSF National Synthesis Center for Emergence in Molecular and Cellular Sciences. Our key goal is to reuse the hundreds of petabytes of publicly available data to get deeper and broader insights. And I've been here at Penn State for about 11 years now.
Thank you. Dipanjan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dipanjan Pan, and I'm a HUC chair professor in nanomedicine with affiliations with nuclear engineering and material science engineering. And my research is in developing next generation translatable materials for biomedical applications.
Thank you. And Mauricio.
Yeah, my name is Mauricio Terrones. I am the head of the physics department here at Penn State, and I'm also directing 2 centers, Center for Two-Dimensional Layer Materials, and also a consortium with companies, which is part of an NSF program, IUCRCs, on the developing atomically thin coatings using 2D materials. Thank
you. So we'll learn more about all of these and the centers that they lead. But before that, I would like to make sure that I go over the goal of the webinar. We're looking at really sharing a bit of a roadmap for building new and evolving interdisciplinary center institutes consortia at Penn State. And we're trying to provide a bit of a knowledge that we have acquired while doing that. We think that this knowledge is going to be really useful for both current and potentially future institute center leaders, as well as good knowledge for those who want to put together competitive center proposals. Some of the key takeaways that we're looking at, and this is also a bit of an overview of what we're trying to accomplish today. We're going to go over a bit of a roadmap for initiating new institutes, centers, consortia at Penn State. We're going to provide a few tips on securing buy-in from collaborators and securing funding. That's going to come out mostly from the panel conversation that we're going to have. So you'll hear insights from the panelists' real-world experiences in leading, revitalizing, or starting new research centers. And then we'll talk a little bit about some actionable steps for improving organizational governance practices. The agenda for today, you heard the speaker introductions. I'll go over a few Penn State policies, structure, and roadmap for establishing new ICCs. We'll have the panel discussion and then the 5 to 10 minutes Q&As and closing remarks. So why governance matters is really, many times people think that it's too bureaucratic to think of governance. I'm going to start with a short video, and then hopefully that would connect to the idea.
That was all I had. Hey, you know what, team? We've been here for a while. How about we order pizza? All right, so how do we want to do this? We order like a half pepperoni, half cheese?
How about we get a full cheese, half pepperoni, and then quarter olive?
I got it. 1 full olives, just total olives, and then 1 really small pepperoni and 2 extra large cheese.
Or we do a whole fleet of pizzas. Half of those pizzas are half Brooklyn crust, half Chicago crust, and they're all 2/3 pepperoni and 1/3 cheese.
Guys, just make sure we get 1 veggie pie, half cheese. That's all I ask.
8 pies, hear me out. On each one of those, okay, we've got 1/8 cheese, 1/8 veggie, 1/8 stuffed cheese crust, no cheese. Yeah.
Hey guys, I got it. 1/8 buffalo chicken, no cheese, no sauce. 1/8 sausage, 1/8 thin crust, Delaware style, then 1/8 totally blank, raw dough.
That's where I run into trouble with raw dough.
Guys! We're all executives. Let's just make an executive decision here.
8 deep dish meat lovers.
But with veggie crusts.
And no.
Okay, so I think everyone got the point here. Why do we need governance? And it's interesting, we have a lot of what we call executives of our center institutes here today, but it's very difficult many times to make executive decisions, and especially hearing everybody out. So why governance matters? It's really because it ensures clarity in roles and responsibilities. Many times it does facilitate decision making. You want to have that ground approach where people express their opinions, they come up with their own ideas, but at the end someone needs to make some executive decisions, and you need to understand what the process for that is. It promotes collaboration, efficiency, allocation of resources, and better communication. It also supports scalability and sustainability. It aligns lately, we've seen after several applications that we had ongoing, especially on the HUC, it aligns with funder expectations for managing funding for expected return on investment. It can also become part of the external identity of the unit. When you have a good organizational structure and governance, it's easier to explain who you are and what you're trying to achieve. And it's not only valuable in the academic environment, but also in partnerships with industry, government, foundations who are also structured, usually have a pretty clear organizational structure to be successful. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're looking at a Penn State ICC roadmap. Many people, when they're interested in putting together a new center, institute, consortia, many I realize they don't know that there is actually a roadmap at Penn State, and there's certain policies that we need to follow. We have several categories at the university level. So we have, for example, university level centers. They usually fall in presidential priority areas, and I gave here one of the most recent, the Cocosiello Institute, that has been funded externally, but also needs to be sustainable. We also have college level that are more focused, and I have some examples here with SAVES and Dutton Institute. We have cross-college, which are multidisciplinary, and we have the interdisciplinary research institutes at Penn State that create some level of confusion. There's 7 interdisciplinary institutes at Penn State, plus ARL, which is also falling under SVPR. They're interdisciplinary, they're larger, and they have underneath, also under their umbrella, a lot of different institutes and centers. And there's also centers across the university that are externally funded. They're temporarily externally funded, but they also want to make sure that they become sustainable to continue beyond the lifetime of their grant. But these ones are exempt from the Reg 05, which I'm going to cover briefly, approval, and they're supported by different specific units. I went over the list of center institutes consortia and I was very surprised to see that we have over 300 at Penn State. So there's a large number of center institutes. Well, we also realize that there's a lot of complex connections between the 300 plus center institutes consortia at Penn State. And what you can see is also there's some level of redundancy across those. We're not going to talk about the redundancy and the connections today, but we want to make sure that people have an understanding that if you're coming with a proposal for a new center, it's important to really look into what others are doing to avoid that redundancy. And it's also important to look into what kind of connections can you have with the other existing center institutes. I mentioned to you the fact that we have under ZPR, we have 8 institutes, interdisciplinary institutes. Under those interdisciplinary institutes, we have over 70 institutes and centers. So HUC alone has 27 centers and 4 institutes, right? And as I said, the Applied Research Lab is added to these 7 research institutes and is collaborating with. There are several steps that we'd like to share with you on how to establish a new ICC. First of all, the first step is really important to identify a potential area of research excellence. It's really important to look into what Penn State already has, its position nationally or globally, or both in the field, the existing faculty expertise, and some of the already available resources. What can you leverage? Are there core facilities, instrumentation, things that we have here that can put us in a really good competitive advantage position? Then it's really important, what I find it difficult, a lot of people, which is a good thing at Penn State, want to be part of consortia, but it's very difficult to find the lead, someone who wants to take charge and lead those activities. So find a faculty to lead it, and then that faculty will start forming their governance structure, their group to co-lead. And the more the better, as long as you have a core group that has clear responsibilities on what they'll be doing. It's important to map all the faculty who could contribute from across the university, because that's going to make a stronger case internally, both internally and externally. And most importantly, don't try to submit proposals without trying to get the buy-in from those faculty. It's important to at least have some initial conversations to kind of gauge their level of interest in that particular research area. And then the next step is you put together a white paper, a proposal that kind of outlines your research area, the people you're working with, directions, your vision for the new center. This should include the organizational structure as well, faculty stakeholders, the milestones. We're usually thinking within the 5 to 10 years, but also broader, longer term vision, sustainability of funding, potential external funding sources that you have identified already, and a plan to secure that funding. It's really important at this step to consult with administration. And administration is different. It's like it depends on who the stakeholders for that consortium center institute are. So you can talk to the dean, associate dean for research. You can talk to associate directors of institutes, directors of institutes, associate VPs for research, directors of strategic initiative, depending on who are really the stakeholders who would have some decision-making in the process. If supported by college or institute, and it's really important, then advance the proposal. And the next step means submitting your proposal to the OSVPR. Once you get approval, of course, you'll have the Senior Vice President for Research approving the proposal and forwarding it to the Executive VP and Provost of the university. This is really, in a nutshell, what's really a good approach when trying to think to put together an internal center institute consortia. And I keep mentioning these terms because these are the terms that if you're naming something center, institute, or consortium, then you will need an approval, or an official approval to have it. Colleges, there's some differences in terms of center institutes consortia that fall under colleges. And I found some really good examples. One, I would like to go over a little bit of the format. The centers that fall under colleges also foster collaboration across the college, but still within the college, and try to accelerate the pace of research progress on some relevant problems, socially relevant problems that can have larger impact. They have to be aligned with the college's mission. So it's really important that to think about future center, how narrowly do you want to look at it? How narrow is your focus? It's expected to facilitate activities on a scope that is beyond what can typically be achieved within a single department. So we're still talking about crossing departments within a college, but still within a college. The mission should be substantially more focused than the collective research mission of any college and department. But they're also looking at forming a focus for targeted areas of excellence that I just mentioned before, right? It's really important to identify the areas where you can be really good. Penn State can be really good. And promote collaborations across departments, colleges, campuses, and across institutions. They're also establishing valuable research resources, such as specialized laboratories, some shared infrastructure and facilities, and can attract a critical mass of faculty to a specialized area. Reason why it's really important, as I mentioned, to engage more stakeholders to get a better understanding of what the needs are, not just your lab needs, but broader at the university level. And of course, there's a strong research focus, but also strategic engagement in teaching and or outreach. At the college level, this is a bit of the process. I think a really good example and much more detail can be found under the College of Health and Human Development. I picked a few elements from there, but I encourage you to look it up. It has a really good overview, and each college has its own. But I thought this one was a really good example, very detailed. So we have it. So the process here is director is appointed by the dean and will report directly to the associate dean for research. There's a 30% appointment in the center, in HHD in this case, and a 70% appointment in their home department. But that can vary really by school, college, and by departments. There's a 2-course credit release for departmental teaching, and the director may also buy out of one additional course. But again, these vary based on agreements. Associate directors and assistant directors may be appointed at the center director's discretion, and they're principally motivated by need related to the scope and size of that ICC. HUC governance structure. So as I mentioned, there's 7 interdisciplinary institutes. HUC has the largest number of centers and institutes among the 7 interdisciplinary institutes at Penn State. And we have our own governance structure that can be also found on our policies on our web page. So our centers and institutes, some of which are actually present with us today, are led by directors appointed typically for a 3 to 5 year renewable term through a collaborative process involving a nomination or even external recruitment in some cases where we want to invest more heavily in a certain area. A public presentation is required and will include an inclusive vision to lead and elevate the community. The appointment will be made by the HUC director in consultation with the HUC executive committee and also with faculty engaged in that particular center institute. And we strongly encourage that each center and institute have an executive committee, typically comprising of about 5 or more members that represent the broad interest of the organization. I mentioned to you the PSU Reg 05 policy. This is important to consider again for those who are interested in putting together their own center institutes consortia. You have the definitions on the webpage of all those different, and also the expectation from the policy of what the research center should do. So as you see, they have to have an identifiable focus. Ongoing funding, that's really important. It can come from different streams, and there's usually, for the HUC Center Institutes, HUC also invests in them to a certain extent. Have funding including multiple grants and contracts and not a single grant. We also have center institutes that are funded through just one grant, but they don't fall under the Reg 05 until they actually have to become center institutes, permanent center institutes. Engage multiple faculty and graduate students, and have some clearly identified rationale for being established. This is, in brief, the approval process. I also consulted with Doug Wolf from the OSVPR because the reports and also the submissions for Center Institutes Consortia go through him, and also Ruth Weber at the OSVPR level. So all institutes consortia center approvals, regardless of whether through a college or at the university level, will have to follow the PSU Reg 05. The request will be sent to OSVPR, and they have to be established with the approval of the Senior Vice President for Research. What I would like to mention, it's if you want to have a center, you don't have to jump necessarily into having an established center. We took different approaches in putting together groups that wanted to work together, that identify a research area. And we've been quite successful in bringing those teams together. We couldn't call them consortia or institutes or centers, but we could call them fora, right? We have a forum for regenerative engineering that is quite active, right? When we had, and Mauricio is going to talk about this a little bit, when we submitted a proposal to the NSF, we also put together a group, VIDER, and we had that group under a different approach, the same thing, a forum. So again, there's steps towards Center Institutes Consortia, and there's some work in making sure that you're successful to some extent before you put in a proposal. So I would like to move to the second part of our webinar. And I have here all of our esteemed guests, faculty from Penn State, who can share from their experience in putting together center proposals, leading them, some of which have been leading centers that have been in existence for 20 years, others just recently joining as institute directors or center directors. So you're going to have a little bit of everything today.
All right. All right. I guess I start first because we're one of the oldest, but I think technically not the oldest center around. We've been the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics has been around for just over 20 years. And I apparently, which is making me feel old, am one of the older center directors in terms of my tenure. I've been director of the center for about 3.5 years. And we've had a number of directors over time. And I should say that I wasn't involved in generating or creating the center, but what I've done is I've stepped into the role of an existing center. Again, our goal is to be a interdisciplinary collection of primarily faculty interested in the exciting biology that governs the parasitic lifestyle, which encompasses viruses, bacteria, fungi, macroparasites, all of the things that feed off of other organisms, and how that generates patterns and processes that we see in the natural world. Those are the things that we're really excited about. But to do that requires an interdisciplinary team of folks that range from protein and molecular scale all the way up to population, community, and global scales, right? And so our goal is to bring all those people together, and on a certain level, just be a collective meeting place for facilitating those discussions. And a lot of our activities are really focused around facilitation, right? Bringing those people together through common weekly discussions, weekly seminar series, workshops and training, as the center has developed over 20 years, where we've developed a graduate student organization, right? We don't have a graduate training program. We don't convey degrees, but we do have a strong graduate student organization that helps to integrate students across multiple different programs, get them talking to each other, learning each other's methods. And again, that helps with a lot of facilitation of development of new research projects that then mature into RO1 level and larger grants, which is our sort of ultimate goal overall. And we have over the years taken on some various large projects. A signature project for us was over 10 years ago we developed the first massive open online course in infectious disease biology that was on the Coursera platform. That's still out there and alive, and actually is now small income generating on the level of year to year, right? But what we'll come back to, that's the broad introduction to our center. What we'll come back to is the experience in governance and what we're experiencing now as trying to maintain a large center. So we'll come back to that after the rest of the introductions.
Thank you, Matt. All right, so Nikki.
Hi, my experience is a little different than Matt's. I've been the director of the Neuroscience Institute at University Park for about 9 months. And while the Neuroscience Institute is a little bit older than the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics, it's almost 25 years old. It did not have a clear identity or structure at University Park. And the Neuroscience Institute, through the College of Medicine, had a very clear role in coordinating clinical services and patient care, and has done that very well, but in a way that wasn't representative of what neuroscience was happening at University Park. We don't have that as a focus area. So when I stepped into the Institute almost a year ago, the goal was to understand how to make faculty and students and staff feel included in the identity of the Institute and understand what the Institute had to offer them. I think that's a harsh perspective, but it's what the faculty would have told you is they didn't see the point of the Institute. So we have spent the last year sort of tackling that head on, helping people understand the value added of affiliating with the Institute and engaging with the Institute and helping to be a part of building it. So that's sort of the contrast of where our Institute sits compared to the Center for Infectious Disease Dynamics. So taking a structure that has existed for a long time, but sort of revamping and reinvigorating it and getting people excited about it.
Thank you, Nikki. We'll move ahead and hear from Mauricio.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, in my case, I will provide 2 examples. I mean, one of them is related to the current slide that is showing the creation of 3 centers now, but basically we first started with the one that was approved by the Office of the Vice President for Research in 2013, and this is the Center for Two-Dimensional and Layered Materials. And that was a conglomerate of faculty which we started to work together in order to apply for big grants and big proposals, and we were very successful. We had 2 centers, right, funded by NSF. One of them was the Center for Atomically Thin Multifunctional Coatings, which was a consortium with industry and is co-funded by NSF within the IUCRC program, which is inter-universities with companies, with industries and national labs. And then the other center that was, thanks to this sort of conglomerate of faculty, that right now we have more than 45 faculty on campus working on 2D materials, is the 2D Crystal Consortium, which is a larger enterprise, again, funded by NSF. And they were given only 2 centers within the country, and this was one of them, which was concentrated on 2D materials. So this provides an example of starting something that conglomerates faculty, and this faculty starts working together. We have a weekly seminar where students present, 2 students from different groups present every week, and the idea is that they start interacting and publish papers and moving the field forward. But that has helped to create new ideas and new centers, so like this one. The other example that I wanted to show is the next slide. shows the from a growing convergence grant, which is by NSF, which is a bit more complicated. It's really trying to get people working in different areas that complement each other. And then we worked on this virus evolution, understanding virus evolution through Raman spectroscopy. And this was a project that we got a few years back again. And it was the first sort of round of projects on convergence. But the idea was to bring together people working in different fields, like, biologists, physicists, engineers, data scientists, all working together and trying to develop new techniques for developing devices to enrich and detect viruses. And this was before the pandemic, actually, so it was very timely when we moved this forward. But just to show you the timeline that takes, in the next slide. So it takes a few years to work on this. So we started in 2013, and we got the funding in 2019. So it was 6 years of working, and we were working with basically resources that were startup funding. We started. I will not go into detail, but you can see every year we made this progress, and we started to demonstrate the feasibility. And once we had preliminary data, that's what we put in the convergence proposals. Then the convergence proposal sort of evolved into the STC Science and Technology Center that we went to the final round last call. And this sort of, basically during the pandemic, we had weekly meetings, and Matt Ferrari was part of those. So weekly meetings just to discuss what can we do together that will provide Penn State uniqueness, and so we can be more competitive. So I think this is just a glance of things that can happen, but I think it takes time. You need to start now, but and then you need to get core faculty working on it. But it's a process that for these big grants, it's not instant, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio. And we're going to move on to Ed O'Brien, who has a different experience, bringing a different experience. So if you'd like to talk, Ed.
Yes, thanks, Camila. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. To start off, I would just say we're all aware of potential threats to funding and whatnot from federal agencies and whatnot. And I would encourage everybody in the call really to think about pushing initiatives for external funding for their centers and for their consortia, so that you're aiming for 70 to 80% external funding and less reliant on the internal funding from Penn State, which will strengthen Penn State overall in our rankings and research output, in my view. So playing off Mauricio's comment, this NSF-funded center that's here at Penn State just started 9 months ago. The timeline I dealt with was about 3 years from start to getting the funding. That was kind of on the faster end, but you're looking at a 3 to 6 year timeline, span to get some of these larger externally funded center grants. And I guess to be just really concise, there's 3 things that I think you need to do from my perspective to have a shot at getting this type of NSF center grant. One is, be prepared to respond to Dear Colleague letters when the NSF says, hey, we want community input on ideas around this theme that might be a future call. That's your opportunity to help shape the call that gets put out for centers. So I saw the Dear Colleague letter. I ran community workshops to try to get community input that we then advised the NSF about what a future call for a center might look like and what space they should look at. And that prepared the team to address that call for a center when it came out. The other thing I would just say is being a known quantity to the NSF program officers is really beneficial. So running conferences, I was running conferences in the US and Europe that we bootstrapped to build community for the 5 years before I even responded to that first Dear Colleague letter, showed me as a connector across multiple disciplines to the NSF program officers. So they were kind of aware I was already starting to build community and had connections across many fields and geographically. So those are some of the things you can do now to start to set yourself up to have a chance to go for these larger, at least federally funded grants. So the center we run, just real quick, is a synthesis center, meaning that we reuse publicly available data. There's 300 petabytes of publicly available molecular and cellular biology data. We're supporting up to 35 working groups across the country and around the world to reuse that data to get insights into emergent properties of molecular and cellular processes. And so we have a core team of staff scientists that are getting matrixed out virtually to support these types of collaborations of teams reusing this data, combining multiple fields, physicists, chemists, bioinformaticians, biologists, data scientists, and so on to address these questions. And the need for this is the fact that almost all this MCB data only gets used once in the preliminary publication, and 98 to 99% of the studies never get reused again, the data. So there's a lot of opportunity to get deeper and broader insights by integrating these diverse data that are already out there and using diverse teams of scientists to get new insights. So that's what we're going after. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A, and I'm really happy, if anybody on the call wants to talk to me after this meeting to hear more about my experience and tips I might have for going after these external center grants, I'd be more than happy to have those one-on-one conversations.
Thank you, Ed, very much. So as you see, there's a lot of diversity in the different center institutes, the roadmap to getting there. So we're moving on to hearing from Dipanjan, who brings a different perspective, different lenses, and different approaches to putting together consortia. So Dipanjan?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Very nice to be here, and this is a great initiative. So thanks to Camellia, I think, and Huck, of course. So my experience has been quite different, and from all the previous panelists. Right now, I'm co-leading two very large consortiums. One that is existing, it's a $46 million DARPA consortia between academia and industry. So there are about 24 partners. And the consortia is really based on developing synthetic whole blood. And the other one, which is starting from May this year, it's a $39 million ARPA-H. And that is in a completely different area of research, and looking at detecting pathogens in air real time. So but most of these consortia, both of these consortia, they're really based on my experience in entrepreneurship and innovation. From my lab, we've started 5 startup companies, and my previous experience in working in industry, and also as I spent multiple years as a faculty in medical school, so that all these things can kind of blended together to develop this academic industry partnership. And that's an important alliance, I think, for being successful in getting these large federally funded grants. For our projects, I think what we really had to make sure that how we translate the technology, and it's just not basic science, how we translate the technology and complete an innovation cycle within the time period of the grant, and considering the challenges that the different cultures, confidentiality, IP and intellectual property kind of aspect. So all these things, I think, as Camellia pointed out, and also several others kind of pointed out about the governance, that is probably the most challenging aspects of putting together these things as we move forward from the initial idea and then kind of teaming up and sharing the excitements for putting something together. Extremely important that I felt that it was to create or generate a framework and a structure that kind of manage these collaborative research initiative between industrial partners and academic institutions. And also what I feel that is defining roles and responsibility and decision-making processes was incredibly important because these are very, very complex teaming structure and responsibilities and ownerships are really key factors here. So again, I'll be very happy to talk to anyone who is interested in putting together large proposals like ARPA-H or DARPA, and I'll share my experience.
Thank you so much, Dipanjan. So you got a bit of the flavor of the different center institutes consortia that you heard about. I'm going to spend the next few minutes just asking a few very specific questions, and then we're going to open up to questions. So please, this is a time when we strongly encourage you to put questions into the chat, submit it to the moderators, and then we'll look into them and ask those questions. So I would like to go back to Matt in particular, because Matt is leading one of our older centers, as he mentioned, and they've been recently through an external assessment of the center. And I would like to get a little bit of feedback, input from Matt going through that experience. So if you could talk about maybe some of the key takeaways from that process, the value of having the external evaluation, and how are you seeing that being useful?
Sure. I mean, I guess just to offer some really important context, because this is a discussion about governance. We started as a small center 20 years ago, and were successful and grew and persisted. But we didn't really do a lot of reevaluation and formalization of governance. We've had it's hard to count, 5-ish center directors over that time period, some of whom were directors for a long period of time. I've been here 3.5 years. Beth McGraw was the director before me, was just about 2.5 years before she moved to department head. And so we actually had a really quite informal structure of governance. And so long as we were all, being productive, that was sort of fine. But I think what leading into our external review, right, we were sort of trying to grapple with our identity, how we should move this now very large group forward and motivate this large group going forward to even, ideally to grow, but even just to maintain university support and maintain our identity and our success. And I think, and really it was in that process that we realized that we did in fact need a formal governance structure to ensure that we kept the voices coming in from all the different scales of scientific investigation that we have. I mean, again, we're distributed broadly across campus. We have 20 very core labs, but upwards of 70 labs that contribute to the center overall. And they speak different languages and use different tools, and ensuring that we had representation from all of those folks as we made decisions going forward was just well beyond what I as an individual could possibly grapple with or handle. And so we started with a process of building a report and a pitch for the center that went to a set of external reviewers, and then went through a multi-day process of those reviewers talking to people within the center, about what the benefits of the center are to them, what the challenges are, et cetera. And then they provided they met with university leadership as well, and then they provided feedback to us on how we looked from their perspective and how we compared to other places. And again, that's I think that external perspective was really powerful. It's very easy to get sort of complacent in who we are and how proud we are of ourselves, and kind of forget how we might look to the outside world. It was very affirming. We got very positive feedback on our intellectual merit and our intellectual contributions and our perception and reputation nationally and internationally. So that was very powerful. And it was actually really powerful to have those statements made by external experts. So we can now, we're not just claiming that we think we're great, but somebody else is telling us that we're great, right? But they also, made a very strong point that we had grown well beyond the structures that we had. And that if we wanted to even maintain ourselves, let alone grow further, that we absolutely needed to formalize a governance structure. And be much clearer about that. And so those are the steps that we've taken over the last several months. We now have an internal executive board that's 6 faculty. We have an external advisory board that's 4 external faculty from outside the university. We have a schedule. We have a schedule of meetings with each of those groups. And we've been engaged in the near term in really sort of formalizing a strategic plan with a set of both research goals and investment goals for growth. And having that has actually really kind of invigorated a lot of our activities and now gives us reason to sort of very intentionally reach out to other partners across campus. And I've actually now spent a lot of time reaching out to other center directors and institute directors and department heads, to have a conversation about who we are and how we're growing. And if nothing else, that's bringing us as a center, more, it's increasing our profile on campus, which I think is something that we had underappreciated, right? Again, we focused on our external reputation, and we were very proud of that. But I think we had let lapse our potential as a leader on campus. And again, the feedback from the external review has really kind of highlighted that and has very much stimulated our activities in that regard.
Thank you very much, Matt. I would like to jump to Nikki now, and because Nikki had to really rethink the structure and rethink the vision of the Neuroscience Institute. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the strategies that you are implementing or have been implementing to re-engage the members and build a strong collaborative culture and governance.
Yeah, okay. I would say that the first thing I did was take a really data-driven approach to understand what the landscape of the Institute was. When I took over, there were 60 faculty affiliated. There are now almost 90. And so what I did was really look at the members of the Institute across departments, across colleges, who's participating, who participates a lot, who wasn't participating at all. And knowing what I know about neuroscience on the campus, understanding where there were gaps or where there were holes. I did things like I looked through historical records of neuroscience at Penn State. I sat with the Penn State News and identified when neuroscience work was coming out but wasn't being highlighted as, being through the Institute or through the HUC. Looking at databases of grants to understand where we had overlap, where we had kind of super collaborators. So all of the first steps that I took were really about crunching data and thinking about that data and thinking about what neuroscience looked like at Penn State and identifying where we could be stronger and where we could build. And then I embraced the sort of Tim Waltz perspective of social capital, which, he had said that you don't win elections to build social capital, you win them to burn social capital to make things better. So the absolute next thing that I did was I called in every favor that I had in neuroscience, and I made an external advisory board for neuroscience. So I reached out to one of the NIH Institute directors to join. I reached out to the president of the Society for Neuroscience. So I used all of the social capital that I had built for neuro and applied it to the Institute so that we would have this external support from the beginning of people who were thought leaders in big spaces throughout the world for neuroscience. So once we had that advisory board in place, who I talked to very regularly, I then really hit the pavement and put the time in meeting with all of the deans, the research deans, the department heads, development across the colleges, to let them know where neuroscience was of service to their faculty, to get their sort of buy-in and support for what we're trying to build here. And then making sure that the people who were already putting in the work for different sort of components of neuroscience understood that they had my support. And what I mean by support is literally my time. So I touched base with all of the graduate program directors, not just through the HUC, but through the other department programs, and helping them organize their seminar series, really just kind of putting in the sweat equity to get people to then invest back in the Institute. I reach out to new faculty all the time to let them know about the Institute, to get them to join. And because I had put this sort of time in with the deans and research deans, they let me know when they have new faculty joining their college that they want to send over to the HUC. So to sort of revamp and reinvigorate the Institute, it was a lot of just hitting the ground and putting in the work and getting people excited about this immensely diverse topic that touches all the colleges. And now that we've done that, we are sort of going back and doing these steps of expanding the governance now that the Institute has grown so large. So we really just had to start from a data-driven perspective to understand what is neuroscience at Penn State, and then lead from that of making contact with all the stakeholders and building from that direction.
Thank you, Nikki. There isn't much time left, and again, we're encouraging anyone who has questions to type your questions. I want to draw the attention. We would like to hear from you how we did today. If you could take some time to complete the survey and inform us, because we always want to get better, and also to announce the next training on budgeting. We're going to have another training under the Hackatalysis series on budgeting. So while we're waiting for your questions, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to ask one last question to one of our panelists. Ed, sorry, you're the one to pretty much close this, but I think your experience is really important for some of the people in our audience in particular. If you could share what was your steepest learning curve when moving from the euphoria of the proposal success to running a national center. Any challenges that you can share? How did you approach those, especially in putting together the governance?
So the fact is, I'm a scientist at heart. I don't know anything about governance when I started applying and all of this stuff. I had friends and collaborators and community, and we just talked science, but putting the governance structure in place was really key. And what I did was found someone fantastic to help me figure out the governance structures that should go in the application, and made the connections. And it's Camelia Cantor who is running this. So long story short, of course, is knowing what you don't know and finding somebody who knows it. And there's resources here at Penn State that can help you if you lack certain connections and certain expertise. These institutes are a great resource because there's people like Camelia and others at other institutes that deal with strategic initiatives and have these connections to set them in place. So that was really key, having somebody with experience beyond just the science, but on the governance side, advising me, what might work, what might not, and so on. I guess in terms of, dealing with problems and solutions, we've only been around for 9 months, but just being flexible, and we're scientists iterating, learning, and adjusting job responsibilities and rules, and having people that are invested in the success of the center, of course, is really important. So, the other key thing is almost most of my day-to-day solutions have been solved by having a fantastic project manager who we were really careful in hiring. They have a lot of initiative and are willing to take on all different roles. So that's been also a key part to the initial success of adjusting to some of the governance challenges that are faced. So that's what's worked so far for me.
Thank you so much, Ed. And we're at the hour, so I would like to thank everybody, including our panelists today. We appreciate your time, and we hope we'll see you again at our next training on budgeting. Have a wonderful day.